1945. A boy was born in North London, who would eventually become one of the most recognizable voices in rock music. For decades, Rod Stewart seemed larger than life. The raspy voice, the wild hair, the sold-out arenas, and the image of a man who could command a crowd with a single note made him look untouchable. But behind the fame was a different story, one that most fans never fully understood. Success did not arrive overnight. Long before the platinum records and worldwide fame, Rod Stewart was a young musician trying to find his place in a rapidly changing music scene. Along the way, he crossed paths with artists who challenged him, inspired him, frustrated him, and ultimately helped shape the man millions would come to admire. Some were friends, some were rivals. Some became legends in their own right. Yet each left a mark on Rod Stewart's life that never completely disappeared. Today we're looking back at three rock figures whose influence on Rod Stewart was far deeper than many fans realize. Their stories reveal a side of rock history filled with loyalty, competition, respect, and unforgettable moments that helped create one of music's most enduring stars. Rod Stewart was born on January 10, 1945, in Highgate, North London, England. Few people could have predicted that the shy young boy from a working-class family would one day become one of the best-selling recording artists in history. Before the fame, before the stadium tours, and before songs like Maggie May turned him into a global star, Rod Stewart was simply a music-obsessed young man searching for an opportunity. The Britain of the 1950s and early 1960s was changing rapidly. American blues, rhythm and blues, and early rock and roll were finding their way across the Atlantic. Like many young musicians of his generation, Rod was captivated by the raw emotion of these sounds. He spent countless hours listening, learning, and dreaming of a future in music. Yet talent alone was not enough. The rock world was crowded with ambitious artists, and standing out required more than a unique voice. As Rod slowly worked his way through local bands and small performances, he encountered musicians who pushed him to become better. Some showed him what true artistry looked like. Others demonstrated the sacrifices required to survive in an unforgiving industry. A few became lifelong friends whose influence remained visible throughout his career. These were not distant celebrities. They were fellow rock musicians fighting many of the same battles, trying to build careers during one of the most competitive periods in music history. What makes Rod Stewart's story so fascinating is that he never forgot those relationships. Even after becoming a superstar, he continued to speak with admiration about the people who helped shape his journey. Their names appear throughout the history of classic rock, and their connections to Rod reveal a side of the music world that fans rarely get to see. Among all the artists who crossed his path, three stand out for the impact they had on his life, his music, and his understanding of what it meant to become a rock legend. The first man who left a lasting mark on Rod Stewart's life was Ronnie Wood. Long before both men became household names, they were young musicians trying to make sense of an industry that offered no guarantees. Their paths crossed during the explosive British rock scene of the late 1960s, and what followed became one of the most important friendships of Rod Stewart's career. When Rod joined the Beck group, Ronnie Wood was already establishing himself as a gifted guitarist and bassist. The chemistry between the two men was immediate. They shared a similar sense of humor, a love of rhythm and blues, and a belief that rock music should feel alive rather than polished. At a time when many bands were becoming increasingly sophisticated in the studio, Rod and Ronnie preferred something more raw and honest. Their partnership grew even stronger when they became members of Faces. For many fans, Faces represented everything exciting about classic British rock. The performances felt unpredictable. The energy seemed genuine, and the friendship between the musicians was visible every time they stepped onto a stage. Rod Stewart was the voice audiences heard, but Ronnie Wood was often the musical partner standing beside him through the chaos. The two men experienced success together, but they also endured the pressures that fame brings. As Rod's solo career exploded during the early 1970s, tensions naturally emerged. Some observers wondered whether success might eventually destroy the friendship. Rod was becoming one of the biggest stars in the world, while Faces struggled to balance the band's identity with his growing celebrity. Yet despite those challenges, the respect between Rod and Ronnie survived. What made Ronnie Wood so important was not simply his musical talent. He understood Rod Stewart before the fame reached extraordinary levels. He knew the ambitious young singer who was still trying to prove himself. In an industry where relationships often disappear as quickly as they begin, Ronnie remained one of the few people who could remind Rod where everything started. Years later, when fans looked back at the golden era of British rock, the images that often came to mind featured Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood, laughing together, performing together, and living through one of music's most unforgettable periods. Their friendship became proof that even in a business famous for broken relationships, some bonds could survive success, pressure, and time itself. If Ronnie Wood represented friendship, then Jeff Beck represented opportunity. Few musicians played a more important role in Rod Stewart's rise than the legendary guitarist whose vision helped introduce him to a much larger audience. When Rod Stewart entered Jeff Beck's orbit during the late 1960s, he was still searching for a breakthrough. He possessed a distinctive voice, but he had not yet become the star the world would eventually know. Jeff Beck, meanwhile, was already earning a reputation as one of the most innovative guitarists in rock music. His technical brilliance and willingness to experiment made him a respected figure among musicians, long before mainstream audiences fully appreciated his talent. The partnership between the two men created something special. The Jeff Beck Group combined Beck's extraordinary guitar work with Rod Stewart's gritty, emotional vocals. Together, they produced music that felt powerful, dangerous, and different from much of what was happening in rock at the time. Many historians now view those recordings as an important bridge between blues rock, hard rock, and the heavier sounds that would emerge in the years ahead. Yet their relationship was never simple. Both men were ambitious. Both possessed strong personalities. Both wanted to move forward creatively. As the group's popularity grew, disagreements became unavoidable. Different visions for the future slowly pushed them in separate directions. What began as a promising collaboration eventually became a story of talented artists choosing different paths. Despite the tensions, Rod Stewart never ignored what Jeff Beck had done for him. Without Jeff Beck's belief in his abilities, Rod's career might have unfolded very differently. The guitarist provided a platform at a critical moment, giving audiences a chance to hear a voice that would later define an era of rock music. What makes their story fascinating is that it reflects a pattern seen throughout rock history. Great partnerships are often built by people who challenge one another. The same qualities that create extraordinary music can also create conflict. In the case of Rod Stewart and Jeff Beck, the disagreements became part of the story. But so did the mutual respect that survived long after their professional partnership ended. When Jeff Beck passed away decades later, many musicians spoke about his influence. Rod Stewart's reflections carried particular weight because he understood better than most how important Jeff Beck had been not only to rock music itself, but to the trajectory of his own life. Sometimes the people who change our future are not the ones who stay beside us forever. Sometimes they are the ones who open a door and forever alter the direction of our journey. Among all the rock stars Rod Stewart encountered throughout his remarkable career, few commanded his respect more than Mick Jagger. Their relationship was never defined by a single band, a lifelong partnership, or a direct mentorship. Instead, it was built on something equally powerful: mutual recognition between two men who understood what it meant to survive at the very top of rock music. When Rod Stewart was still establishing himself, Mick Jagger had already become one of the most recognizable figures in the world through the Rolling Stones. Jagger embodied everything a frontman was expected to be. He was charismatic, unpredictable, energetic, and impossible to ignore. For young singers across Britain, he represented a new kind of rock star. Rod Stewart was no exception. As Rod's career accelerated during the 1970s, comparisons between the two men became increasingly common. Both possessed instantly recognizable voices. Both filled arenas. Both attracted enormous media attention. Yet their approaches were very different. Mick Jagger often projected calculated confidence and theatrical control, while Rod Stewart built his image around spontaneity, warmth, and a more approachable style. Fans debated their differences endlessly, but Rod understood that surviving for decades required more than talent. It required resilience, discipline, and an ability to adapt without losing your identity. Over the years, the two men crossed paths at concerts, award ceremonies, industry gatherings, and major events throughout the rock world. They belonged to a generation of musicians who witnessed extraordinary changes. They saw vinyl records give way to new formats. They watched musical trends rise and disappear. They experienced the pressures of fame that many younger artists could barely imagine. Through it all, both remained relevant. What Rod Stewart admired most was not simply Mick Jagger's success. It was his endurance. Rock history is filled with talented artists who burned brightly and disappeared. Jagger refused to disappear. Decade after decade, he continued performing, evolving, and connecting with audiences around the world. That level of longevity earned Rod's respect because he knew firsthand how difficult it was to maintain. For older fans looking back today, Rod Stewart, Ronnie Wood, Beck, and Mick Jagger represent something larger than individual careers. Together, they symbolize a generation that transformed rock music forever. They came from modest beginnings, faced enormous challenges, and created songs that continue to resonate decades later. Their stories remind us that behind every legendary voice stands a network of friendships, rivalries, opportunities, and influences that helped shape the artist the world eventually came to know. As the years passed, Rod Stewart achieved nearly everything a rock musician could dream of. Millions of records sold, packed arenas across the world, induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a career that stretched across generations. Yet the story of Rod Stewart is not only about fame, it is also about the people who helped shape the journey. Ronnie Wood stood beside him during some of the most exciting years of British rock, proving that friendship could survive even the pressures of superstardom. Beck provided the opportunity that helped introduce Rod Stewart to a wider audience and challenged him to become a stronger performer. Mick Jagger showed what it meant to endure at the highest level for decades, earning respect from fellow musicians who understood how difficult that achievement truly was. For older fans, these names bring back memories of a remarkable era when rock music felt unpredictable, authentic, and larger than life. They remind us of a generation of artists who built their careers through relentless touring, unforgettable performances, and genuine passion for music. Rod Stewart's story cannot be told without these men, because each played a role in shaping the artist millions came to admire. Perhaps that is why Rod Stewart continues to resonate with audiences today. His success was never created in isolation. It was forged through friendships, collaborations, challenges, and lessons learned from some of the greatest figures rock music has ever known. And when fans listen to his music now, they are hearing not only the voice of Rod Stewart, but echoes of an extraordinary generation that changed rock forever.